Share screen. This is probably. There you go. Colorado Election Protection Hotline, how can I help you? Thanks so much for joining, everybody. We're going to give everyone just another couple minutes. We'll probably start at like 2 minutes after. So hold tight. We'll be right with you.
You know, one thing I think that would be helpful in that is to, I do think that we will, maybe sooner rather than later, but need to have the kind of why when Sarah does pull out ignorance is the right thing to do. We have to be balanced. It's not, and I think in the case of this particular example, she mentioned but there are other examples like on our nonprofit transparency, which she was officer. Now, those are things that we call the transparency, and it helps us call out. And I think it's helpful for our partners to understand a little bit better, even if we don't understand in Carolina, just strategy. And I think that we need Sarah so both in defense of our I'm not giving, I don't think that's like
Okay, so it looks like we might still be expecting a few people, but I'm going to go ahead and get started just to be respectful of folks' time. First off, thank you so much for volunteering with Just Vote Election Protection. Your work is really important, and we couldn't do this without you. If you're on this webinar right now, it means that you have signed up with our coalition to help ensure that your friends and neighbors have access to the polls. And so just to let you know a little bit more about Just Vote Colorado, we were established in 2004. We are a nonpartisan coalition that works to ensure that every eligible voter who wants to vote is able to do so, and that every vote is counted accurately. I just want to stress that we are a nonpartisan group, so we don't care how people vote, what their political persuasion is. We just want to ensure that if you're eligible to vote and you want to vote, that you can do that. So we are here to protect everyone in Colorado's vote. We have a couple different ways that we help people, and throughout the next hour, we'll be talking about what those are. So as I mentioned, we are a coalition. My name is Amanda Gonzalez, and I'm the Executive Director of Colorado Common Cause. Colorado Common Cause is not the only organization that runs Just Vote. So our steering committee is comprised of Disability Law Colorado, the Colorado Lawyers Committee, Mi Familia Vota, Colorado Common Cause, and the League of Women Voters. Nationally, we work with Election Protection and NALEO. So you have just joined a large group of people. I think in total in Colorado alone, we have about 80 people who are doing the work of this webinar today, and then probably an additional several dozen that are trained attorneys that will be help staffing our call center. So thank you again. This is really, really important work. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do today is we're going to go over a general overview of how elections work in Colorado. It's unlikely that you will need to know every single bit of this information, but the more informed you all are, the better, because you are going to be our front lines. So if I throw a lot of information at you, that's okay. You don't need to know every single piece. We are going to be emailing you a follow-up with a lot of this information captured. So feel free to ask questions in the chat box, and you always can reach out to us after the webinar if you have additional questions as well. All right, so without further ado, let's talk about how elections work in Colorado. You may not know, but we have one of the best voting systems in the country. In 2013, we updated our election model. If you lived here before then, you may have noticed that after 2013, you started automatically getting your ballot in the mail. You didn't have to request a mail ballot or an absentee ballot. If you were registered by about mid-October, that ballot automatically came to you. Once you have that ballot, you can either fill it out and mail it back. You can also drop it at any drop box throughout the state. Or you can go to your local voter service and polling center. That's what we renamed polling places. They're called voter service and polling centers, which we often abbreviate to VSPC. You can go to any VSPC and either drop off your ballot, or you can still vote in person. If you just like the experience of voting in person, maybe you don't trust the mail, maybe you just want to get your sticker. That's totally fine in Colorado. You can vote your mail ballot, or you can go vote in person. Another significant change that we made in 2013 is that you can now register up to and on election day. So even if you moved from Denver to Jefferson County and you totally forgot to update your address, that's okay. You can still go into any VSPC in your county and register and vote on the same day. So it's pretty exciting. I love my job. We've been answering the voter hotline here in our office for about a week now. And I love that even if there's a hiccup with somebody's registration, they can still go re-register and vote in Colorado. And that's not the case in every state. So you all are volunteering in a great state to be doing this work. Okay, so Let's talk about who's eligible to vote, because there's a chance that as you're doing election protection work, or just even as you're talking to your friends and neighbors, you might get this question. In Colorado, you must be at least 18 years old on election day, or the last day of the election. We do have pre-registration here in Colorado, and that means that 16 and 17-year-olds can pre-register to vote, and then once they turn 18, they're automatically registered. We get some questions from 16 and 17-year-olds who said, hey, I filled out a voter registration form. Does that mean I can vote in this election? Unfortunately, unless their 18th birthday is before election day, they can't vote in this election. You have to be 18 by election day. Okay, you also must be a US citizen. And finally, you must be a resident of Colorado for at least 22 days before the election. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to have resided at your current address. So perhaps you, again, were living in Denver, you just got your new place, and so you moved to Jefferson County a week before the last day of the election. That's totally fine. You can still go into a voter service and polling center, update your registration. You're eligible to vote because you've been a resident of Colorado for at least 22 days. So if you meet those criteria, then generally you're eligible to vote. The one caveat, which I'm going to get to later in this presentation, is if you have a felony conviction in Colorado, if you've served your sentence and you have finished your parole, then you are eligible to vote again, but you need to re-register. Okay, so let's talk about what's needed to register to vote in Colorado. Again, we have same-day registration, so even if somehow your friends or neighbors have missed that there's an election coming up, that's okay, they can still go register. If you have a Colorado driver's license or state ID, you have to show, you have to present that number to register. If you don't have a Colorado driver's license or Colorado ID card, you can still register to vote using the last 4 digits of your Social Security number. If you don't have any of that information, that's okay. You can still register to vote. You'll just need to go into a voter service and polling center and get some help. Keep in mind that the kind of ID that you need to register to vote is different from the kind of ID that you would need to vote in person. So to register, if you have a driver's license from Colorado or an ID card from Colorado, then that's the number that you need to use to register. When you go to vote in person, you do need to show some sort of ID, but it doesn't have to be a driver's license or state ID card. Okay, so this close to the election, if somebody's interested in registering to vote, we generally tell them just to head on in to a voter service and polling center in their county, and they'll take care of them. Okay. So as I mentioned, the best way right now is for people to go to a voter service and polling center. You can still register to vote online at govotecolorado.com. The problem is we're pretty darn close to the election. In fact, today, which is Tuesday, the 29th of October, is the last day that you can register online and still get a ballot mailed to you. So after today, your friends or neighbors or people that you meet as you're doing your election protection volunteering will need to head into a voter service and polling center where they can register to vote, and they can just vote in person right then and there, which is pretty great. Okay, so as I mentioned, you have options for voting. So just because you got a mail-in ballot doesn't mean that that's the ballot you have to turn in. If you lost it, or your dog ate it, or you accidentally marked the wrong person, you didn't actually want to vote for that candidate, that's no problem. You can still go into a voter service and polling center and vote. And many of you will be volunteering with us to keep some eyes on those voter service and polling centers. This year, the Colorado ballot is one of the longest in history. We have 13 statewide initiatives, in addition to all of the candidates and all of the judges and all of the local ballot issues. So it's a long ballot, and we're a little nervous about lines. So we'll talk about in-person voting here. Okay, so most people in Colorado choose to vote their mail ballot. So they fill it out at home when they've got lots of time, and they either send it back in the mail or they go drop it off at a drop box. Like I said, today is the 29th, and so today is actually the last day that we are recommending that people mail it back the regular way. Ballots must be received by your county clerk by 7 p.m. on election day. If they get there after election day or after 7 p.m., then they're not going to count. And we want to make sure that everybody who wants to vote and is eligible to vote votes and has their vote counted. And so because the mail can be a little tricky, sometimes it's a little slow, depending upon where you are in the state. It might take more than a couple days for your ballot to go from your house or your workplace to the county clerk's office. So after today, we really recommend that you either take that ballot to a voter service and polling center or you drop it off at one of the drop boxes. So what happens if somebody lost their ballot, or like I said, their dog ate it, they spilled something on it? That's no problem. You can just go to any voter service and polling center in your county and get a replacement ballot. You don't even need to bring the messed up ballot with you. That's okay. If I know sometimes my husband doesn't always pay attention to what he's thrown in the recycle bin, so maybe he accidentally recycled my ballot already. That's okay. If I just go to my local voter service and polling center, anyone in my county, they can get me a new one. And once they've issued a new one, the old one is going to be automatically canceled. So I don't have to worry about any shenanigans happening with that old ballot. All right. And finally, if you're curious about if your vote has already been received or not, you can do so online. Visiting govotecolorado.com is a great resource. And then many of the counties have their own ballot tracking application. In Denver, it's called Ballot Trace. In Arapahoe County, it's called Ballot Track. So they're all a little bit different. I think Denver's even sends you a fancy text message if you're in their system that says, hey, we got your ballot. So pretty great, and gives people a little bit of reassurance that their ballot got to where it was supposed to be, even if they didn't drop it off at a voter service and polling center. Okay, so let's talk about a little more about VSPCs. The number of voter service and polling centers is different based in each county. There are requirements based on how many voters live in that county. This model of changing to VSPCs instead of traditional polling places is fantastic because you can go to anyone in your county. So if, you know, the one closer to your work is more convenient than the one closer to your house, as long as that's in the same county, no problem, you can go to that one. At a VSPC, as I mentioned, you can register to vote. You can update your registration. So if you're like, oh shoot, I moved and I forgot to tell them, you can go to a voter service polling center, get that updated. If you updated your name because maybe you got married this year or you're transgender, there's all kinds of reasons people might update their name. You can do that at a voter service and polling center. You can update your name on your voter registration information. If you want to change your political affiliation, a voter service and polling center is a great place to do it. As we mentioned, you can get a replacement ballot. You can also vote on an accessible machine. So if you are somebody that has a disability and the paper ballot that gets mailed to you just really isn't going to work for you, that's okay. You can go to any VSPC in your county and vote on an accessible machine. And finally, you can drop off that mail ballot. All VSPCs must provide secure access for everyone, including people who have disabilities. So part of what we are going to be asking some of you to do is to keep an eye on your voter service and polling centers. All of them should be accessible for everyone, including people with disabilities. And so if you go by and you notice that the parking spaces are really far from the voter service and polling center, and you have to go down maybe a really steep hill. And you know that if you were somebody who had a mobility device like a wheelchair, that hill wouldn't be possible. That is really good for us to know to get corrected if we need to. So they all need to be accessible, and they are all already open. Voter service and polling centers will also have hours that they're open this Saturday. So in Colorado, we have Saturday voting. So even if you work the kind of job that you're there all day, Monday through Friday, and you just can't get to a voter and service and polling center during the week, but you want to vote early, or your dog ate your ballot, you need to replace it, you can go this Saturday. They will have hours for people to get help on, even on a Saturday. So help us get the word out about that as well. Okay. At a voter service and polling center, any voter can vote on an accessible machine, whether or not they have a disability or whether or not that disability is apparent to someone else. So if you are somebody with a disability, you can ask to vote on an accessible machine. And if you aren't somebody with a disability and you just prefer that machine, that's okay too. I do want to add that if you are somebody that has a disability that appears obvious to other people, you do not have to vote on that accessible machine. You can vote on any machine that you choose. So sometimes election judges just want to be helpful, and they'll see somebody that maybe has a physical disability, maybe they're in a wheelchair, and they'll say, oh, hey, we have your machine. If that person wants to vote on that machine, that's okay, but really they can choose any machine that works for them. Okay. And again, you can go to any VSPC in your county. I will say that one of the reasons that we sometimes see people feel like they got turned away is that they went to a voter service and polling center that they thought was in their county, and it's actually not. Maybe that's where the county line is. You must vote, if you're voting in person, you must vote in your county. And so those might be a time when an election judge says, oh, you're actually not in this county, you need to go to a different voter service and polling center. That could be why. And then also wanted to mention that many counties have the machines, but also give you the option of paper ballots. So if you want to vote on paper, everybody has the right to do so. Okay, so if you vote in person, you are going to need to show one of the acceptable forms of ID. It can be any of the IDs that are on these lists, and I'm going to show you two different pages. So there's the first page, there's the second page. There are a lot of different IDs that we accept in Colorado, and you can show any one of these at your local voter service and polling center when you vote, but you are going to have to show at least one of them. So the most common kinds of IDs that people have are a Colorado driver's license or a state issue ID card, a US passport. Passport cards don't work, but a regular passport does. A Colorado University College or vocational school ID card that has a photo on it is totally fine. A valid military ID. So we hope that just about everyone will have one of these things. A current utility cable or telephone bill or bank statement, paycheck or government check, those work too, but they're going to need to show the name and address of the voter as well as be from within the last 60 days. So we try to make that list pretty comprehensive so that anybody who is trying to vote hopefully has one of those IDs or can get their hands on one. But you will need to show at least one of those in order to vote in person at a VSPC. Okay. I mentioned that if you had to get a replacement ballot, they would cancel out the ballot that they sent you already, so you only have one live ballot in the system at any time. So unfortunately, if you voted already and then you did a little more research and were like, oh gosh, I wish I'd changed my mind, that's it. You only get the one chance. If it's already submitted, they can't get you a new one. Every signature you have to sign your ballot, and every signature is verified against we have all of your other signatures on file any other time you voted to make sure that they match. If your signature didn't match, they would send you a letter to do what's called curing. So they would say, hey, is this, we have that you voted, we're a little worried that your signature doesn't match. Can you please confirm that this is you and that you actually voted this ballot? So that's one of the protections here in Colorado is they do check those signatures. And don't worry, if you get one of those letters or if your friends or neighbors do, that's okay. It's important to get it back quickly. But It's not uncommon for people's signatures to change a little bit over time, especially if you're somebody who's getting older. You might have noticed like, oh yeah, you change your signature a little bit. That's okay, just as long as we're able to get that cured. And I wanted to mention that all voting machines in Colorado do create a paper ballot. So we have paper ballot backups to ensure that those machines are counting everyone's vote as they intended to. All right, so now I wanted to talk about some of the issues that are common in Colorado that you may get questions about. So we're going to talk about student voting, voting if you're formerly incarcerated, if you are experiencing homelessness, if you have disabilities, language issues, and electioneering. So those are the next issues that we will go through together. All right. So you may get questions about whether or not someone who is in Colorado to go to school, maybe they go to CU or DU, whether or not they can vote here in Colorado. So the first important thing is that you only vote in one place. Right? No matter where you live in the country, you're only entitled to vote in one place. And that one place needs to be your principal address, the place that you intend to return to if you leave. So I obviously live here in Colorado. I live in Wheat Ridge. And when I go on vacation, I'm going to come back to Wheat Ridge. If I go take a class somewhere else, I plan to come back to Wheat Ridge. That's where I own my home. And so Colorado is my place of residence, so I vote here. For students, this could vary. Some students might see Colorado, where they go to school, as their permanent home. They moved here, they are invested in the community here, and so they're going to vote in Colorado. If they don't feel that way, they see their education as a temporary stopover, and really their real home is the state that they came from. That's okay too. They just need to pick which of those statements is true for them. So if you are going to school here in Colorado and you see this as your permanent home, the place that you would return to if you left, then you are entitled to vote in Colorado. I mentioned this earlier, but it's worth hitting on again. You cannot vote in Colorado if you are currently serving a sentence or parole for a felony conviction. You can vote in Colorado if you have finished that sentence and your parole. If you are currently in jail serving a sentence for a misdemeanor conviction, or if you're awaiting your trial, you haven't been convicted of anything yet, then you're still entitled to vote. And if you are only on probation, right, you've finished your sentence or your parole and now you're on probation, you are eligible to vote. So a lot of people don't know that, and they do need to re-register. So if you had a felony conviction and now you'd like to vote again, you, at this point for this election, would need to go into your VSPC in your county. You can re-register and pick up a ballot or vote in person. All right. So if you don't have a permanent home, if you're experiencing homelessness, you are still eligible to vote, even if you can't give us a great address for where you're always going to be and where you're always going to return to. That's still okay. You do have to give, when you register, a home base. So the place where you usually are. This can be a park or a campground, a shelter, and that's how they decide sort of what district you'll be voting in, is the place that you usually are. You do also have to provide a mailing address, and if your home base that you gave is not the place that has an address, right? It's a park or something, then you can give a different mailing address. So some shelters are able to receive mail for people. That's a great place to have your ballot mailed. But the important takeaway from this slide is that even if you don't have a permanent home, you are still eligible to vote. Experiencing homelessness is not a reason to stop somebody from voting. Okay. Another important factor is even if you have a disability, then you are still eligible to vote. We don't have competency requirements here in Colorado. Nobody on this webinar had to take a test to prove that you were, I don't know, capable of voting. We don't do that here. So individuals with disabilities absolutely have a right to vote, and they have a right to receive assistance in casting their ballot. Okay? So if you need help casting your ballot, maybe you need somebody to help read the ballot to you, you can do that on an accessible machine, or you can get help from anybody you choose or an election judge. The only caveat to that is that the person helping you cannot be your employer or union representative. We just want to ensure that all voters are voting freely in the way that they choose, that they're not being intimidated anyway. Okay? And you also have a right to vote independently. So again, sometimes people working the VSPC just want to be helpful. And so they're like, oh, let me help you vote. I can see that you have a disability. If you don't want their help, that is totally fine, and you are entitled to vote independently. Okay? So this is something that we want to watch for when you're helping do election protection work, is if the person's disability is a barrier to them voting. Like I said, there's a steep hill and they're not able to get from the parking lot to the voter service and polling center. If they're coming out of a voter service and polling center and say, gosh, I really wanted to vote, but they didn't have the kind of machine I needed, or there wasn't anybody to help me, or they said that my friend that I brought with me wasn't allowed to help me. None of those things are true. We want to make sure that even if you're somebody that lives with a disability, you are still able to cast your ballot if you're eligible. Language assistance is similar. So voters in Castilla County, Denver, and the Rio Grande County must be given voting materials in Spanish. So that is the VRA that mandates that, and it's based on our census, how many people in that county primary language is Spanish. So the only counties in Colorado right now that meet that Voting Rights Act requirement are Castilla, Denver, and the Rio Grande. But even if you are in a different county, you are still allowed to have assistance with language. Right? So that can be from an election judge, or it can be from somebody else, right? Maybe a voter isn't very confident in their English, and ballots are only available in English in their county. That's okay. They can bring someone with them that they trust to help them with the ballot. Or if there's a bilingual judge, the bilingual judge can help them. But you are entitled to that help. So you're allowed to bring a helper with you to the polls. That's totally okay. The only thing is, the person who's helping you with that language assistance is going to need to sign an attestation that they did not try to sway or influence the voter in any way. Okay. So speaking of swaying or influencing voters, there is no electioneering within 100 feet of any voter service and polling center. And that cute little notice sign that you see at the bottom of this slide, that's what the signs will look like 100 feet out, right? So past this 100-foot point, no more electioneering. Okay, so what is electioneering? It is campaigning for or against any candidate who is on the ballot or any ballot issue. So what might this look like? This might look like bringing signs to the polling place and standing outside with them. This might look like your t-shirt, right? So you really like a candidate, or you really care deeply about one of the initiatives that is on the ballot, and so you've got your shirt that says vote yes or no on this thing. You cannot wear that shirt into a voter service and polling center. You can't wear any stickers or pins that say support this initiative or support this candidate or don't. All of those things are not allowed within 100 feet of a voter service and polling center. I particularly want to stress this for you, our election protection volunteers. So as I talked about at the beginning of this webinar, we are here to help anybody who is eligible and wants to vote, vote. We want to ensure that that fundamental right is protected. And we don't care what their political persuasion is or what issues they do or don't care about. We want them to be able to freely and accurately cast their ballot. So because we would never want our election protection volunteers to be the ones that are electioneering, please make sure that as you're doing this work, you aren't wearing any of the t-shirts or the stickers or any of those things. I know that we all have our own opinions about what is best for our communities, and that influences how we vote, and that's great. As an individual, I hope that all of you vote. I hope you vote your whole ballot. But we just want to make sure that none of our own personal opinions are flowing through to this work. This is really nonpartisan and here to help everybody. So maybe you're participating in this election in another way, and you're working with an initiative or a candidate. Make sure that you leave all of those t-shirts and stickers and handouts and all that good stuff back at home. All right, so those are the basics of how elections work in Colorado. I hope you're feeling really great about your understanding of how those all work. And so now what's your role? Why are you here? What are you gonna be doing? So some of you, and all of you actually may end up doing all of these things. So the first thing that is really important is we are going to have people monitoring lines. As I mentioned, this is one of the longest ballots in Colorado's history. So in Denver early voting, the average person is taking about 12 minutes to complete their ballot. And the person who has taken the longest time so far, and this is only early voting, they had a voter who took over 90 minutes to finish their ballot. And we know that, especially in the last 2 days of the election, next Monday and Tuesday, there might be people who are like, oh gosh, it's election day, I kind of forgot, I'm going to go after work. So they're going to show up at 6 o'clock, and maybe they haven't done all their research. So they're going to need to read through all those really detailed questions to remember which one was which and how they wanted to vote. So it might take a little longer. Most of the counties, I've been doing meetings with the clerks, and most of the counties are increasing the number of machines that they have available. They're anticipating that this is an election that has garnered a lot of excitement and that it's a very long ballot. So we're hoping that lines will be reduced because of that extra preparation, but we're also expecting that since it will take people longer to vote, we might have longer lines. So we're looking, part of what we're going to ask you all to do is go around to voter service and polling centers. You don't even have to go in. You can just do a loop in your car or take your bike up or park and then walk around. We want you to check for accessibility. Is there parking for people who have disabilities? Does it look like you would be able to get in? Right? The next thing we're going to have you look for is long wait times, particularly next Monday and Tuesday. You all are going to be our first line of defense. So you're going to be going around, and particularly if you're noticing longer wait times in some areas of town but not others, we care about that, right? So and does it look like it's just people who, it's a longer line because it's a longer ballot and it's taking voters a little bit longer in those voting booths? Or does it look like something a little bit more nefarious is going on? Then we would be really concerned and we would want to get our legal teams involved. You're looking for electioneering. So the election judges who are working those voter service and polling centers will also be keeping their eyes out for this. But we want to make sure that there aren't people doing electioneering within 100 feet of those voter service and polling centers. You are also going to be looking for intimidation. So does it look like the voter service and polling center that you've been assigned to is safe for all voters? We got a number of calls in the past about sometimes there are drop-off locations that are in the street. Denver in particular does these, so it's kind of convenient. You can drive through and drop off your ballot. So here is the problem. Those drop-offs are required to have police at them for safety purposes. First, it's in the middle of the street, so we don't want anybody getting run over. And the second is, it's in the middle of the street. We would never want somebody to drive up and steal ballots or something crazy. And so what Denver does is they have law enforcement there to ensure that those ballots are safe and the people that are in the middle of the street are safe. They should be a relatively good distance from the ballot box themselves. What has sometimes happened in the past is that law enforcement is trying to be helpful, and they'll say, oh, I'll help take your ballot from you and I'll put it in the box. Well, for some members of our community, that's pretty intimidating, right? Not everyone in Colorado maybe feels safe and comfortable around law enforcement. We hope that we do, but we know that not everyone does. And so we want to ensure that everybody, that's not a deterrent for them to cast their ballot. And so if you see something that just doesn't feel right to you, we'll talk about how you would escalate, what those next steps would look like, but that's what you're keeping your eye out for. I guess I really hope that we don't have any other kinds of intimidation, but if there was a group that was kind of hateful or unkind, and maybe they were trying to stop voters from voting, you all would be the ones that would put eyes on that and would be able to help us stop it. And then finally, you're keeping your eyes out for people being turned away. So if you are in line to vote in person by 7 p.m. on election day, you are entitled to vote. So if we do have long lines and you got there and you got in line before 7, you are allowed to vote. Not everyone will know that. And so part of your jobs might be to let people know in the back of that line, hey, you're still entitled to vote, please stay here. We would never want an election judge to come out and say, oh, nope, 7 o'clock, I know we've got a big long line. I know some of you have been here since 6:30, gotta go home. That's not true, and we wanna make sure that that doesn't happen. So you all are gonna be our eyes and ears and ensuring that if there's problems, we get them quickly resolved. I do wanna say that this is a fun and interesting volunteer opportunity because I'll be honest with you, you might be bored. If at any point in this experience you are a little bit bored, that means that you're doing your job because it means that we don't have issues. It's kind of a funny spot to be in because this work is so important that you're the front line. You're the one that are making sure that voting is accessible, that intimidation isn't happening, that people aren't being turned away. You might be the ones that are helping correct misinformation, that are telling people, no, it's 7 o'clock, you're allowed to stay. And we hope you don't have to do any of that, right? We hope that it's smooth sailing, that there aren't lines, that there isn't intimidation, that there isn't electioneering, that we don't have accessibility issues. And so if all goes smoothly, you're going to cruise around, you're going to check it out, and you're going to say, all quiet, all good. So just because it might be a little quiet does not mean that your work isn't important. It's very important. You might find problems and you might help us resolve them, and you might help just verify that all is going well and help to ensure that all keeps going well. Okay, so those are our line monitors for people who are able to do that. The next opportunity to help is to report misinformation. So on one end of this spectrum is that you might see inaccurate information online, right? I don't know how many of you are part of maybe your Nextdoor online community for your neighborhood, or maybe you belong to a Facebook group. I know I belong to Wheat Ridge Neighbors. And people might report in those groups, oh, polls close at 6 today. Or I've seen advertisements on social media that said, today is the last day to register to vote. Well, that's not true. And you know that now, right? That we have registration up to and on the last day of election. So if you see something that you now know is misinformation, you are going to help us correct that. And I'll get to the how of that on the next slide. The other part of misinformation that we are hyper-vigilant about is mailers. So I know that, like me, many of you are getting, what seems like dozens of those cards in the mail about the upcoming election. People wanting you to vote for them or not vote for the other guy. And sometimes the information on there, particularly if it comes from groups that are out of state, is inaccurate. Right? So it'll say the same thing. It'll say there's a voter registration deadline, or maybe it gets the times that the polls are open wrong. That's important, right? Because maybe, your neighbor gets that and says, oh my gosh, I'm not going to vote now because I didn't register in time, right? We don't want people falling for that. So the final piece would be that we are hoping that you all can help get the word out about the election. Again, in a nonpartisan way, we have information that we hope that you'll distribute to your networks, that you'll tell your neighbors. So let's talk about the how. Okay, so the next step is you have been part of this webinar, so now you know all the important things that you need to know about elections in Colorado. If you are willing to be a line monitor, and as I said, it's a little more than line monitoring because we're hoping that you're looking for accessibility and intimidation and all that stuff. But if you're willing to be a line monitor, we are going to send you, after this call, we're going to send you an acknowledgement form that we're going to ask you to sign. And so what you'll be certifying on there is that you attended this training, that you understand how elections in Colorado work, and that you understand that this work is nonpartisan, that we are here to help voters, all voters who are eligible. All right. Once you have done that, then we are going to assign you a voter service and polling center, or if you're willing, a series of voter service and polling centers that you are going to be in charge of, in that you are going to be the one that is our eyes and ears at those VSPCs. Our hope is that you will check out your assignments somewhat frequently. This gets more important as the last day of the election year. So next Monday and Tuesday, we hope that you would check out your voter service and polling center. And like I said, if everything looks good, this might mean just kind of going over there, parking, walking around, making sure that there's no funny business. We hope that you'll check it out pretty soon, actually sometime this week. That way, if there is an accessibility issue, the parking lot doesn't look okay, the doors, they don't have parking for people with disabilities, the doors don't look like the kind of doors that you would open if you had a disability, that you would check for those kinds of things now. That way, if there's an issue, we can get it resolved quickly. And then we hope that as the election gets closer, particularly next Monday and Tuesday, that you might be able to swing through in the morning. Did the voter service and polling center open on time? Was, online it says it's supposed to open at 7. Was it actually open? If not, you're going to let us know and we're going to get somebody out there to correct that. Does it look like voters are having trouble? There's a group of people outside that, are upset because they didn't get to vote. You would help us troubleshoot that. And then we're really hoping that close to 7 p.m., particularly if you're assigned a voter service and polling center that we think is going to be really busy. So these might be places like the CU or Auraria campus, that you are able to go over there and maybe hang out for a little longer and make sure everything's okay, make sure that people aren't being turned away at 7 o'clock. That's what you would do as a line monitor. So we're going to get that acknowledgement form out to you. You're going to sign it. You're going to let us know where you live or where you work, whatever's more convenient for you, so that we can assign you some voter service and polling centers. And then you're going to kind of monitor those voter service and polling centers for us. Okay, so that's the next steps for people who are willing and able to be line monitors. How do you report misinformation? So you can go to justvotecolorado.org, which is also an excellent resource to share with your family and friends. On that website, if you have seen misinformation elsewhere, you can send us an email through the website so we can get that taken care of. You can email misinformation, so maybe you took a picture of a mailer that you got in the mail or a screenshot of something that you saw on Facebook. And you can actually email that directly to me, which is A. Gonzalez, AGONZALEZ, at commoncause.org. And then your final option is that we may, hopefully we don't need to, but we may put together an emergency response team. So what that would look like is if there was some really egregious misinformation that went out. So in New York, there was actually during the primaries, there was a group that sent out that the polling locations closed at a different time than they actually did. So you can imagine how terrible this would be. if there was a group that sent out thousands of text messages or thousands of emails and told voters that polls were open until 9, but they actually close at 7, that would be really bad because there might be people who work full-time jobs, they're trying to get their kids fed, and they're like, oh, great, it's open till 9, I'll put the kids in bed and then I'll scoot over at 8:30. That would mean that they wouldn't get a chance to vote, and we want to make sure that that doesn't happen. So in the event that we have something very bad like that happen, a large-scale send out of misinformation, then we would likely email or call everyone who is part of this webinar right now and ask you to help us combat that. So that might look like making calls. We have a great text message program if you have a smartphone that we can send you a link to an app, and it allows you to text something like 10 people per minute to say, hey, there was bad information that went out. The voter service and polling centers actually close at 7 p.m., not 9. Right? So if we are trying to do a large-scale outreach to ensure that people are not getting bad information about voting, then we may reach out to you on the last day of the election and say, can you help us get the word out? There are about 80 people who have signed up to work with me and you all to be a team of election heroes and help us make sure that this election goes well and that everybody who is eligible to vote and wants to vote is able to. So we may need a rapid response team. Hopefully we don't, but in the event that we do, we would reach out to you on Tuesday and ask for your help. And like I said, that would likely be emails, phone calls, or text messages that we would have you help us send. And then finally, we will be emailing you a handout that it's just a little half pager that has most of the information that we went into in a lot more detail. So the basics of how do you register, where can you register, where can you get more information about where to vote and how to vote, and also the kinds of IDs I think are on there. So we will be sending that out to you, which we hope that you will distribute to anyone who needs it. And then finally, the Just Vote Colorado Facebook page we're putting up shareable content on there pretty regularly, every couple days at least. So lots of people didn't know that we have voting on Saturday in Colorado. And so we put together a little Facebook picture that had information about how you can vote on a Saturday in Colorado. And we asked people to share that because we were getting a number of calls on our Just Vote election protection hotline and emails through our website, and people didn't know that you could vote on a Saturday. So we wanted to spread that information. We will also have information about after tomorrow, you should go drop off your ballot if at all possible instead of mailing it. That way you can ensure it gets there on time. We'll have information about how to find your local voter service and polling center. So I don't know about you, but I see lots of information online that isn't quite accurate. Or my neighbors have been asking in those Facebook groups, where do I register to vote? Or how do I vote? Or I messed up my ballot. What do I do? If you all see those kinds of questions, we hope that you will point them to the Just Vote Colorado website, or that you'll share some of the graphics that we'll be sharing with you to help make sure that all of your friends and neighbors get more information and get accurate information, because I'm sure you guys have not been surprised at all about the level of confusion that is out there. So just to recap, the 3 activities that we hope that you will help with is that you will help ensure that the voter service and polling centers are functioning as they should, that you will help us catch misinformation that's out there and correct it, and that you will share accurate information about voting within your networks. Again, I just want to highlight the importance of being nonpartisan, that in the course of doing this work, that you're not electioneering, that you're representing the coalition well. You all are so important and so generous with your time that in the middle of a Monday, you tuned in to learn about elections so that you could help other people. That's pretty darn cool. And we are really appreciative. And we hope that you will continue to represent the coalition well, and that we can all be a team together that helps get the word out about people voting in Colorado. And that finally, that you're here to help ensure that elections run smoothly and that everyone who has the right to vote can vote. And we couldn't do it without you. So totally understand if you support candidates or you support a certain initiative, but just please try and keep that separate from this work. And then finally, I wanted to provide you with some resources. Again, we will also send this out via email, but to register to vote or look up your voter registration to make sure that the information is accurate. You know, maybe you didn't get your ballot in the mail, or your neighbor didn't get his or her ballot in the mail, and they're like, gosh, I'm not sure what to do. Going to Go Vote Colorado to check on your registration. You can look it up. It's a great starting point. Our website, justvotecolorado.org, is fantastic as well. We have a list of every voter service and polling center, as well as drop-off location in every county listed on that website. So you can look them up there and find one that's convenient. And you can also find Colorado-specific information. Almost all of the information that was in this slide deck is also available somewhere on our website. So that full list of IDs, that list about your voting rights and whether or not you can vote in Colorado, the requirements for registration, all of that is at justvotecolorado.org. And then finally, like I said, we work with the Colorado Lawyers Committee to recruit legal volunteers, so people with legal training, to staff our hotlines in both English and Spanish. So English speakers can call 866-OUR-VOTE, or 888-VE-VOTA is the Spanish hotline, and we can help people in either language. These are also going to be the places that you reach out to if there's something going on. So the final place that people can get help is to text 720-710-1661, and we will respond to your text message with questions about voting. All right, so this is a webinar, so it's not totally interactive, but there is a little question box on your screen. So if you have any questions about any of the information that we just went over, you can type them into that little question and answer chat box, and I can get those answered for you. So if there are any questions, we'll leave the chat box open for a little bit here. And then finally, I just wanted to provide you with that information again. So the website is justvotecolorado.org. The 800 numbers are right in front of you. So I guess they're 800 numbers, but the toll-free numbers, 866-OUR-VOTE and 888-VE-VOTA, will get you a live human being who is based here in Colorado on the last 2 days of the election. The hotlines are open now. We're answering the English hotline now from Colorado. The Spanish hotline, some of our national partners are helping us with until the last 2 days. But you'll get good information from a trained volunteer. And then finally, my information is below. Again, my email is agonzalez@commoncause.org. Or I put my cell phone on there because if you all have an emergency, if there's something really concerning going on that you see at a voter service and polling center, or maybe you get one of those terrible text messages with bad information and we're worried about who else got it, that is my cell phone number, 626-354-3939. You can reach out to me if there's something urgent that we need to take care of right away. So let me pull up our chat box here, and it doesn't look like we've had any questions come in, but I don't want to cut you off. If there are any questions that come up later, that once you're reviewing the follow-up email that we're going to be sending to you, if you have any questions about that, it wasn't answered, we are here. You can also call the Just Vote hotline, and we are here to help. So if there are no questions, I want to thank you all very much for your participation, for your willingness to volunteer, and for helping us keep elections in Colorado safe for all Coloradans. So thank you again. We really appreciate you, and we look forward to working with you. I think the only final closing thing is that we do have paper handouts available, as well as snazzy buttons and stickers. So if you want one of those, we'll put that information in the email as well. We would be happy for you to come to our office in Denver and pick up some goodies if you want them to take with you as you're doing this work. or just, to cover your cool water bottle. So thank you again. You all have been fantastic. And I hope that we will see you soon. Have a wonderful day. And thanks again for all your good work.